Joining us now is PFF draft analyst Trevor Sikkema. We thank you so much for joining us. You're also the co-host of the NFL Stock Exchange show, which I got to ask you, where did that name come up with first and foremost?
So honestly, we were just trying to come up with an NFL draft-centric show for PFF. I've been covering draft for a really long time. It's such a passion of mine. And honestly, we talk about it like, oh, this guy's stock's up, his stock is down. And so we're like, let's do the NFL Stock Exchange. It could be about different players and teams and coaches and everything. And so throughout the year, we just give it kind of a stock market feel of this is trending up, this is trending down. And so it's an easy way to talk about a lot of our favorite stuff.
I'm not sure if our general manager, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, knows about that yet, but he is a guy with a stock exchange background, a former Wall Street kind of guy, and he just went through his second offseason here in Minnesota. How do you rank the job that he's done, or what kind of an impression do you get of him as a GM so far?
Yeah, I love his approach to everything, right? I mean, like he kind of came in and everybody thought that he's going to be like the analytical darling and, hold the flag for everybody who is saying you team build through analytics and all that good stuff. And he certainly has. But what I've loved the most about him over the last couple of times that I've had the chance to hear him speak, whether it's been at the combine or postseason pressers or whatever it's been, is he's just so genuine in his approach. You can tell he doesn't have an ego about this. Now, he takes pride in his work, of course, like everyone else does, but egos are often the thing that gets in so many good leadership decisions way, right? And that's really where you find a lot of really smart football people, whether it's head coaches, general managers, whatever, they falter, it seems, because of an ego that might get in the way. And it just feels like whether it's been something that has been a success for him early on, or maybe just a lesson that he's taken in these first couple of years, he's approached everything the right way. And I've loved just listening to how he speaks. And to me, that's somebody who you give them time, they'll be able to figure it out, and they'll be able to get the team where you want them to go.
So on that note, where do you think the level of improvement was for the Vikings in this particular free agency period to this point?
Yeah, so, they're moving on from a couple of their big veterans, right? They're moving on from Kendricks, they move on from Thielen, they move on from these guys that have been around for the team for a long time. And so you knew that there was going to be some big changes and some different shifts of identity, but love the Marcus Davenport addition. Really thought that they had to beef up whatever their front was going to be. Wherever they want him to play, I think that Marcus Davenport gives you that size, speed, strength combination to play him in a variety of different spots. If you want him as a 5 technique edge rusher, he can line up there for you. If you want him inside more as a 3 technique defensive tackle at times, I feel like he's got that versatility. And so he's a guy who you love to bring in because he can fill multiple holes for you, depending on where your strengths and weaknesses are. Also really like the Byron Murphy signing too. When we went into this offseason, it felt like corner, secondary, with the youth that was there and then just the inexperience that they had, that was going to be a major point of emphasis for them in free agency and then in the draft as well, doing a ton of different mock drafts. It feels like when we get to the Vikings at the end of the first round or in the middle of the 20s, we're picking corner for them almost every single time. Now, Murphy certainly helps that. And as every good general manager will tell you, you want to take free agency, be able to fill the holes that you have on your roster, to take that best player available approach when you come on the clock in the draft, because it's so unknown, even with all the preparation that you have. So those are the two that really stand out to me as the big ones, that they were able to get some good talent on the roster as they head into the draft.
It's funny you should mention that, because I did just watch the mock draft show that you guys just put out, the NFL Stock Exchange on YouTube. And I think it's your counterpart, Connor, he chose the Vikings pick, and he chose a wide receiver. Now, I know he chose Jordan Addison out of USC, and I know that there have been several mock drafts that are kind of pivoting after this free agency in what the Vikings will do. You guys mentioned that it was a bit of a hard one for you to think about. It was a tough spot to be at 23. Where do you see the Vikings going with the 23rd pick in the first round? We know Connor's pick, but what would your pick be, knowing the moves that they've made so far?
Well, I think the receiver's still on the table, right? A lot of times I've also thought about Jordan Addison in particular to the Vikings, because I love the combination of Addison and Justin Jefferson. These two are route running masters. And anytime that you would put these two players on the field, you're asking a lot of another team's secondary, because it's just not often, even at the pro level, that you've got guys that are good enough in coverage to stay hip to hip with players who are as good as route runners as Justin Jefferson certainly has already proven that he is. And what I think Jordan Addison's going to be able to do as well. So I think he's certainly an option. A guy like Quentin Johnston from TCU as well, if they want a bigger bodied receiver, if he happens to get there, a Jackson Smith and Jigba, a Josh Downs, if they want more of a slot stud kind of a player to be able to play close to the middle of the offensive formation. So all those guys I think are on the table, but I do go back to corner, right? I mentioned I love the Byron Murphy addition, but in today's NFL, there are so many different shapes and sizes of wide receivers that offenses put out there. And there's also so many of them. We see 3 wide receiver sets, 4 wide receiver sets across the league every single week, depending on who you play. They've got those kinds of tendencies and they have that kind of talent in their wide receiver room. That means that safeties included, you've basically got to have at least a 7-man rotation that you can throw out there at corner and at safety of guys coming in and being able to match up with different personnel. So even though I like the move of bringing in Byron Murphy, like I liked Lewis Seen last year, I liked Andrew Booth coming out as well. Those guys are good. You need a little bit more. And so if a really good corner falls to them at 23, I think you got to take a long, hard look at it. And fortunately for the Vikings, this is a really strong cornerback class. And so it's not often that you can project a guy with starting caliber talent to make it to you all the way in the middle of the 20s. But in this draft in particular, they're going to have that opportunity to do so.
For sure. And then the Vikings don't pick again until the 3rd round. So we're talking deep positions. What is another position that's not cornerback where the Vikings get a lot of value from maybe in those later rounds on day 3?
Yeah, I feel like wide receiver's probably going to be that spot, right? Unless somebody really blows them away in the 1st round where they've got to take this guy like he's going to be a major difference maker for the offense. That might be the case for them in the 1st round, but if not, wide receivers deep. You got a lot of different types of wide receivers. I mentioned all the shapes and sizes, guys that shoot, I think throughout the top 100 of the draft, you can get yourself a good wide receiver. We saw some good guys coming through the Combine, through the Shrine Bowl, through the Senior Bowl. They can really litter those 3rd, 4th, even 5th rounds where you can get a wide receiver that you can feel confident at least getting in the lineup there. Are they going to be a wide receiver 1 type of potential? Maybe not, but somebody who could definitely contribute for you and get some new talent in there. So wide receiver is definitely one of them. On the same line, I think the tight end could be an option as well. I know that they like the tight end options that they got, but it's a really nice and deep receiving class in particular for the tight end position. So being able to get those guys on the roster, I think it can never hurt. So those positions, and then I'll throw linebacker in there as well. Yeah. Obviously, you know, like you're losing Kendricks, and so you're trying to replace him a little bit. If you get somebody that you like, a traditional off-ball linebacker, you know, for example, a Dorian Williams from Tulane is somebody who comes to my mind right away. A Henry To'o from Alabama. Those guys, if they're available in the 3rd round and you think that's where you need to go, beef up that middle of the defense, and there's going to be some options for them there as well.
Well, if Brian Flores is watching this interview, he certainly will be excited to hear about all the additions defensively that could be on the table for the Vikings. Thank you so much to PFF's Trevor Sikkema for joining us today. You can catch him on the NFL Stock Exchange show on YouTube or follow him at Tampa Bay Trey. We won't fault you for the Twitter handle just screaming where you're from. No, tease.
Look, I got to represent for the roots. You know, I'm moving all around the country in my life, but the Twitter handle at least lets you know where I'm coming from. So
I love it. It just rolls off the tongue. So Tampa Bay Trey, go and give them a follow. They'll be obviously covering the draft and free agency on PFF for the next few months and so forth and so on. So we appreciate you coming on, Trevor. Thanks.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Anytime.